ready to read, say amen.
接下来谁准备好了要读一下以赛亚书的14章24节。
Lieutenant, can you read?
You open up, hold on one second.
Amen. I can. 14章。
Yes,
I can read.
Okay. Go for it.
I have finished
24.
in the 23.
27,
Verse
right?
23 will be finished. We should start from verse 24.
第一点是24到27吗？
Sounds good to me.
24开始，可以开始。
Yes.
Yeah, from 24 words to which words?
Well,
27?
27 will be good. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
24 to
万军
27.
之耶和华启示说：我怎样思想，必照样成就；我怎样定义，必照样成立。就是在我地上打折亚述人，在我山上将他践踏。我家的恶，他家的恶，必离开以色列人；他家的重担必离开他们的肩头。这是向全地所定的旨意，这是向万国所伸出的手。万国之耶和华既然定义，谁能废弃呢？他的手已经伸出，谁能转回呢？阿门。
Amen.
This is a prophecy against Assyria.
这个是论亚述的预言。
God is speaking.
是神在讲话。
And he's speaking very firmly. He's sworn.
他是启示说，
People usually swear when people disbelieve what you're saying, right?
当有人不相信你说话的时候，一般都会说，要发誓。
So he says the Lord Almighty has sworn for emphasis.
他说，万军之耶和华启示，用这样来强调。
When God plans something, it stands. He's planned this, it's going to
我怎
happen.
样思想，当神怎样的思想，事情就怎样的成就。
It's kind of like the gardener that puts a flower in the garden or a tree, it's going to be there.
就像一个园丁似的，他把草和树就是种在园子里，然后他们就在那里。
He says he's going to crush the Assyrians in his land.
他说他在我的地上打折亚述人，打折亚述人。
Have you ever trampled anything with your feet, just walked all over it with your feet?
你前天是在就是你的脚，当你走的时候，就是踩踏过什么东西吗？
For those of you who've gone to university campuses, you know there are paved sidewalks going from building to building.
如果你去那个大学的话，你看在大学里，就是它都有那种人行道，就是在两个建筑物之间。
They're always laid out in beautiful designs by an architect.
它就是被建筑师们非常就是设计的非常漂亮。
And they take you from the door of one university building to the next.
然后它可以把你就是从这个楼这个建筑物到那个建筑物去。
They pave it with bricks or stones, and then they plant nice, beautiful grass.
但是那个用就是石头还有砖呢是给堆成的，然后旁边种了非常漂亮的花草。
What happens though, the students don't walk on the paths.
但是呢是don't walk on it, right?
They do not walk on the stones.
他们不是在那个荆棘上走。
They're in a hurry to go from this door of this building out the door to this door on the other building.
就是他们是比较着急的，他们不是在那个路上走，比较着急的从这个走到那个。
Students are always in a hurry, so they walk on the grass in a straight line to the next door.
所以他们根本不是按照这个小路上走，而是他们走直线，从这个建筑物走到那个建筑物。
And you get these muddy paths through the grass where the students walk in a straight line to the next door.
然后呢，就是又会有一条他们在泥地上走出的那种像小径一样，像小路一样。
Most university governments put up signs saying, "Keep off the grass. Do not walk on the grass."
因为大家都是大学呢，都会在草地上留一个标识，就是不要践踏草地。
Students, however, are known to want to be disobedient to the laws.
然后学生我们都知道，他们就是不想听话。
They are they're in the process of growing up into adulthood.
他们是就是马上就要变成一个成年人的这个过程当中。
Children disobey to test the boundaries.
小孩子也不听话，他就想试试你的底线是在哪里。
Every parent knows this. Every nanny knows this. That's what children do.
所有的父母都知道，那所有的那些做家庭教师的也都知道。
And that's why you see so many student demonstrations all around the world.
所以就看到这个在全世界，其实所有的学生的表现都是这样。
That's just the
或者他
nature
们
of
的那种游行示威，或者是全世界的那种游行和示威。
it's the nature of students. I've seen it in Korea, Africa, America.
就是学生的一种就像天性似的。我在韩国、在美国、在欧洲我都见过。
So the students trample the grass to make a path to the next door.
所以这个学生们呢，他就是走在草地上，就践踏在草地上，这样就会走出一个小的捷径出来，然后就到另外一个 building， 就到另外一个建筑物上。
When I was young, the administration put up signs to say, "Keep off the grass."
当我年轻的时候呢，当时那些行政人员就会放一个标识在那儿说不要践踏草地。
All over the world, university administrations now are paving the dirt paths that have been trampled.
Pave.
They put in concrete.
然后但是现在呢，就所有的这些他们就把那个学生踩的那个路就用水泥给它铺上。
Or if they want to keep the ambiance of the campus, they use cobblestones to match the old ones.
如果他想要就是把那个整个这个就是他建完的这个氛围就是跟大学其他的这个氛围是一样的话，他会就是用那种就像大理石那样的东西。
That was my observation in the cities around the world on university
这
campuses.
是我在全世界在城市里对那个大学的这种观察。
And then I moved to the countryside in the southern United States.
然后我在那个美国的南部，然后我就又搬到了乡村。
Here they had big acres of green grass growing cows on it. A lot of cattle.
还有一个很大的，然后它有很大的那个草，然后大概是几英尺的，然后上面是有牛。
And I noticed these dirt paths all over the fields, going from the green fields down to the brook to get water.
然后我看到它在这个草场的周围呢，就是有很多很多的这个就像路似的，然后它是从这里走到可以喝水的地方。
The cows were like the students. They walked in the same place every time to go down to get water.
然后这个牛呢，就像学生一样，他们都是走同样的一个路，然后去喝水。
But I noticed the cow paths, while they were still dirt, were different.
但是我发现这个牛走的这个就是牛走的这个路啊，就是虽然它还是在泥土当中，但是是不一样的。
They did not go in a straight line. They wandered around down to the
他们不
water.
是走直线，他们都是蜿蜒着就走，然后直到喝水那块。
For students, the emphasis is time. They need to get to the next class.
对于学生来说，他们强调的是时间，因为他们要赶到下一个上课的地方。
The cow does not like to walk up or downhill.
但这个牛呢，不喜欢上坡和下坡，
So he takes a slow, winding path down the hill.
所以他下山的时候呢，他是蜿蜒着那种是走出去。
Kind of like a mountain road in Italy or any mountain anywhere. Zigzags up the mountain, zigzags back down.
它就像那个像爬山的路，就像上山爬山路和下山路，它都是那个资质型的那种。
People have been walking long before they rode in vehicles.
在人们那个在建造了这些就是可以开的这些车之前的人们都是步行的。
If you're pulling a wagon with horses, you cannot go up the hill like you can in a car. The roads wander
如果你
around.
是一个马拉着一个马，如果一个马拉着马车的话，你不能像开车那样直接开到那个山上，它要这样式的，就是来回这么走。
So in the mountains, roads were trampled down in the old days of Jesus, before Jesus, in the days of Isaiah.
所以在所以就是在那个耶稣那个年代，或者在耶稣再往前的那个年代，山上的路呢是被走出来的。
So these oppressive Assyrians are going to be trampled down just like grass in the highway.
所以就是那个在叙利亚那些忽视他们的人就会被践踏的，
His
就像那个
yoke,
草，就像在高速公路上的草一样。
he has enslaved these people. The yoke is going to be taken off God's people.
然后他因为亚述人当时是奴役了以色列人，然后他们加在以色列人身上的恶意也被离开。
And the burden is going to be taken off his shoulders.
然后他们所加的重担也被离开他们的肩头。
Everybody who travels has bags.
任何就是旅行的人都会带个包，
And they usually bring somebody along to carry the bags if they're rich.
如果他们很有钱的话，他们会雇一个人帮他们去拎这个行李。
In the old days, that's why men had wives.
这就是在过去的时候，为什么那个男人都有一个妻子？
Somebody has to carry the bag.
必须得有人去拎这个包。
When soldiers came through town, they would get a local native to carry their backpack.
如果士兵们就是路过这个城的话，他会让当地的人帮他们来背他们这个行李包。
That's what God is talking about here in Isaiah. the burden is going to be taken off the shoulders of God's people.
这就是以赛亚书在这里是所讲的，他说那些重担必从神的土地当中挪开。
He says God's made this plan for the whole world.
他说这是神向全地所定的旨意。
God is not just the God of the Israelites, He's the creator of the universe.
神并不仅仅是以色列的神，他是这个宇宙万物的创造者。
People who believe in many gods think there's a God of the mountains, a God of the valleys.
如果一个人是就是多神论者，他会认为这个有在山上的神，有在地谷当中的神。
They're the river gods. They're the ocean gods.
是带有水神，还有水神，还有海神。
This is how people think when they believe in many, many gods.
如果这个人是多神论者的话，那他就是这样相信的。
Isaiah is reminding the people that the God of Israel is the creator of the universe.
以赛亚再一次提醒大家，我们的这个神是宇宙的这个创造者。
If God has laid a plan down, who is going to change the plan?
如果这个神已经定义了，谁能改变这个计划呢？
Have you ever worked for a really authoritative boss?
你曾经在一个是非常就是那种就像比较专制的那种老板一起工作吗？
A boss who says, this is the way it's going to be?
然后这个老板说事情就应该这么做。
Don't talk about it, just do it.
不要再说了，就这么做。
How do you thwart a boss like that?
你是怎么样能够阻止就是这样的老板呢？
What happens if you don't do what you're told to do?
如果你不做你告知应该做的事情，会怎么样？
The old phrase in America is you cannot fight City Hall.
因为在美国有一个那个他俗语就是说你没办法就是跟市政府去对，你没办法跟市政府斗。
In my family growing up, when my dad said, this is the way it's going to be, it was the end of discussion.
如果就是在我家，就是在我长大过程当中，在我家里，如果我爸说事情就应该这么做，那这个就没什么可谈的了。
There were times my father was very democratic. We discussed things.
但是我的父亲也是，就是他是非常是民主的，因为我们也是谈论一些事情。
But when he made up his mind, this is the plan, that was the plan.
但是如果他一旦决定了这就是要做的，那就是这么做。
Maybe you've had a teacher like that in the classroom, a strict teacher.
可能就是可能在课堂上你也遇到过这样的这个教师，就是一个非常直的。
God says, this is the way I am.
神就是说我就是这样。
God's hand is stretched out. Who can turn it back?
神的手已经伸出，谁能转回呢？
So Isaiah warns the Philistines, their time is coming.
在这里，那个以赛亚又说，非利士，他又论非利士的预言。
And then God goes on to speak against the Philistines.
然后，神开始讲关于非利士的预言。
So let's read verse 28 down to 32, the end of the chapter.
所以我们读一下28节，我们读一下28节到32节。
If you're ready to read, say amen.
好，我来。阿门。
Go for it, Liu Chang.
亚哈斯王崩的那年，就有以下的末世：非利士全地不要因击打你的杖折断就喜乐， 因为从蛇的根必生出毒蛇，它所生的是火焰飞龙。贫寒人的长子必有所食，穷乏人必安然躺卧。我必饥荒致死你的根，你所余剩的人必被杀灭。门哪，应当哀嚎；城啊，应当呼喊。非利士全地啊，你都消化了，因为有烟从北方出来，他行伍中并无乱队的。可怎么回答外邦的使者呢？必说，耶和华建立了西安，他百姓中的困苦人必投奔在其中。阿门。
他们
The Philistines were the enemies of God's people for a long time.
非利士人跟以色列人一直都是他们的这个敌人啊，他们关系很不好，就是很多年都是这样。
They were on the coast to the north and the east of Israel.
他是在以色列，他们是在以色列的北边还有东边。
They fought the Philistines all the time. That's where the giant Goliath came from that David fought.
因为当时就是他们以色列人跟腓利士就是征战了很多年。我们也讲过，就是大卫当时是击杀了那个歌利亚，他就是腓利士里的那个壮士。
They were very happy to hear that Israel was going to be taken captive.
腓利士当时听到以色列人被掳的消息呢，一定是非常的高兴的。
And Isaiah reminds them that they too are going to be struck by these people coming from the north.
然后以赛亚在这里告诉他们说，他们也一样被从这些北面来的人给击打。
He compares what's going to happen is they're going to have a snake, a very quick moving snake.
然后他这里讲的呢，他就用蛇做了一个比喻。
He says the poorest of the poor will survive a little while, but then they'll all be wiped out by famine.
他说贫寒的长子必有所食，但是我必以饥荒致死你的根。
Or maybe he just says that the poor are going to survive, but the root of the people, the core of the people, the leaders of the people are going to be destroyed by famine.
或者他说的是贫寒的人最后人生存下来，但是那些就是为中心的为合手的人可能会因为饥荒而死。
Now, in the old days, when trouble came, you went inside the city walls for protection.
在那时候，就是如果有战争或者一些事情，人们都会到城里去躲起来。
People gathered together to build the city walls to have a place of protection. That's why you built the walls.
人们聚在一起会把城墙给建起来，这样的话呢，可以用来保护它。
The walls were built to keep people out.
墙被建起来是为了不要让别人进来。
Did they build the wall in the north of Great Britain called Hadrian's Wall to keep England inside or to keep Scotland outside?
反正它这有个城是建立在哪儿，然后它会因为 that to protect English.
Yes, it was to protect England. Yes.
它是英国人建立起来保护英国人，不让苏格兰人进来。
Was the Great Wall of China built to keep China in the south or to keep northern Mongolians in the north? Was it built to keep people out or to keep people in?
就像那个北方的长城，它建立起来是为了保护那些南方人呢，还是为了防止北方的那些蒙古游牧民族的入侵？它是让人不让出去呢，还是不让别人进来？
For the longest time, you built walls to keep people out.
很久以前你建立墙呢，就是不让别人进来。
Even today, a wall is built in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico to keep people out of the United States.
就现在在那个就是在德州还有另外一些州，它也是建了一个墙，就是为了不让别人进来。
God's people, Israel, had no prisons. There were no jails in Israel.
在以色列呢是没有这个监狱的。
Jails were what the Gentiles had. Jails came in with the Romans.
监狱呢，然后监狱呢是外邦人所有的，有的就是罗马人就有。
The Apostle Paul was thrown into Roman jails. Israel had no jails.
当时使徒保罗是被下到了罗马的监狱里，因为以色列是没有的。
Do jails and prisons have walls to keep people out or to keep people in?
然后是如果监狱的那个墙是不让别人出去，还不让别人进来。
It was a second thought to build walls to keep people in.
就是另外的一个想法，就是说你建墙呢，就是不让别人出去的。
In Germany, in Berlin, you had the Berlin Wall between East and West
在
Germany.
德国我们有柏林墙，因为他当时把就是东西的德国是给分开。
Was that wall built to keep people out or to keep people in?
他这个墙呢是把人不让别人进来，还不让别人出去。
Now, how can you tell why the wall was built?
你怎么样能够鉴别这个为什么这个墙是被建起来？
On the top of the wall, you have barbed wire.
那在上面呢，你有那个就是有铁丝网。
Is the barbed wire curving towards the inside or is it curving towards the outside?
那这个铁丝网的这个尖儿呢，是往里面呢，还是往外？
That's how you can tell if it was built for offense or defense.
那你就知道它是为了防御还是为了抵御？它是为了防御还是为了就是它是防止进还是防止出？
The walls here deal with Are you okay? I had to check on the cook. The walls here
它
deal
就它 OK。
The walls here deal with the city wall for protection.
在这里城呢，主要是指那个城墙，它是为了保护的作用。
And the walls of the city are not going to protect them.
但是这个城墙的这个城却没办法保护他们。
The army coming in is like a black cloud of smoke.
然后这个敌人来的时候，就像一种黑烟升起，就像那个云彩一样，就像烟一样。
No, I apologize. We've just had a visitor come and go from the house.
不好意思，我们今天有个人来到我们家里，
So I've been kind of distracted. I apologize.
所以我那个可能就是有点分心，所以不好意思。
We have a local musician who is going to be putting on performances of the children.
我们这有一个当地的一个艺术家，他是会为了那些孩子们 ，he's going to play for the children, or he is going to set up like performance for the children.
Well, she is
反正他要
setting
做小孩子表演的一些事情。
she is setting up for a review of the students. They're all going to be playing in a performance.
哦，就是他会那个，就是他会检测看这些小孩子们表演。
There are a lot of students.
有很多学生。
And she wanted a Chinese-Japanese backdrop, like I have behind me.
哦，就是他想要那个，就是中国还有是美国的，就是那种backdrop is that screen kind of.
Yes,
you
like the
have
screen. Yes, like the
use as a
screen.
background.
Yes, like the screen behind me.
就是
Yeah.
它那屏风，就是它那个屏风。
It's like the screen behind me.
就像我现在后面这个屏风是一样的。
And she came to borrow it.
他来是管我借这个。
And so I had to get distracted and make sure she got the screen. See all the people going to be playing.
然后我给大家看一下这个我手里拿的这个就是它上面就是列出来了，就是谁要表演，谁要表演。
I know some of you have had.
Kind of recital.
Yeah, I know many of your children have been in recitals before, and you've gone to listen.
所以它就像小孩那种钢琴表演似的。
And I just find it humorous that they have to come to an old American to get a screen to go behind the piano.
所以我就觉得这个比较有意思，他们要来的一个年老的美国人那个家里，然后介绍后面那个屏风。
I've always liked them.
我经常我很喜欢他们。
You can hide a lot of junk behind them, can't you?
因为你可以在那个屏风后面藏很多的，就是一些你不要的东西，好垃圾也好。
So we're going back to the Philistines.
所以我们再回到非利士这里。
And the walls around the Philistine cities.
然后在非利士它的城就是有城墙。
There's going to be no protection when this army comes in.
当这些军队来的时候，这个城墙起不到保护的作用。
There's not a straggler in its ranks.
他行伍中并无乱队的。
Have you seen a military parade?
你曾经见过就是军队的游行吗？
All the soldiers marching in step.
所有的士兵们都是就是伴着整齐的步伐。
When they pass by the parade stand, they all turn their head and look at the leaders.
当他们走过这个阅兵台的时候，他们的头都转向就是那种在看台上的那些领导者。
And after they pass the reviewing stand, they all turn back and look forward.
然后当他们那个走过阅兵台的时候，头又转过来，然后朝前看。
All their arms swinging in unison.
然后他们的这个手呢，都是就是统一的那个摆度。
They're made to look like a very well-oiled machine.
然后他们看起来就像一个就像一个机器一样，非常的整齐划一。
And they get to the corner and the man says, "Wheel right." And they all turn and go down the side streets.
然后那个当你走到那个就是最后走到边上的时候，然后他就说我们已经到了，然后所有人都会想右转，然后就会下到边上。
This is the way commanders of men and armies have moved lots of people around quickly for a long time.
这样的话呢，这些指挥官就可以把这些就是部队也好，军队也好，可以很快的把他们移动。
You teach people how to move, to march.
你教人怎么样，你可以教他们怎么样的前进，
And you teach them how to obey instructions.
然后你也要教他们怎么样的能够听从指令。
It's a pretty easy 1-2 step. Teach them to move, teach
就
them
是
how to
很容
obey.
易的，就是1、2、3，就像3步式的告诉他们怎么走，怎么样的听。
It's amazing how much you can do if you can teach your children how to move and how to obey.
就是很惊奇的话，你能怎么做？就是教你孩子，让他们怎么样的就是能够去到哪里，怎么样行动起来，怎么样能够听。
And just remember, they're not going to do it naturally.
但是我们要知道，孩子们不会自然而然的会这么做。
They know how to read the sign that says keep off the grass.
他可以读，就像上面标识写的是不要践踏草坪。
But what do we want to do when somebody tells us, don't do this?
但是当有人告诉我们不要做的时候，我们都想要怎么做？
Even grown people who ought to know better. We want to, well, I'll show you. We want to disobey.
就是甚至是我们成年人，就是也是想要想要不听从。
God is telling the Assyrians and the Philistines, this is the way it's going to be.
但神在这里告诉的是亚述和非利士他们将面对的这种结局。
When famine comes to an area, it doesn't matter where you go, does it?
如果当那个饥荒来临的时候，不管你在哪儿，这个你都逃不过，是吧？
Now, the bad news doesn't stop with the Syrians and the Philistines. It goes on to Moab.
当然，这样的预言不仅是对亚述还有非利士，现在又谈论到摩押。
And I promised we would move quickly through all of these prophecies against people.
然后我跟大家说，他在这里讲的关于各种这个预言的事情，我们可能会学得很快。
I spent a lot of time beating down the grass so we can move quickly.
然后我花了很长的时间，就是把草就是都给剪除掉，还是我打了草，然后我们就可以很快的再往下讲。
Chapter 15 makes good sense to people who live in Asia.
因为第15节对于那些住在亚洲的人听起来非常合理的。
It makes good sense to people who understand the country, as opposed to
然后
urban living.
对于那些就是如果你比较了解这些国家的话，就是比较容易理解。
It might be a little confusing to people who live in the city.
Living in Asia?
In the city, it's for country people.
It's easy to understand, but if you are okay， 就是如果你住在城市的话，可能不太了解。
If you've lived in the city all your life and think milk comes out of a plastic jug, you may have trouble.
他说，如果你要是住在乡村的话，比较容易了解；但你要是住在城市的话，你因为牛奶就是在那个牛奶瓶里的话，那你可能不太容易理解。
So who wants to read chapter 15? Just read all 9 verses.
谁想读15章，就是把整个这9节都读完。
And don't worry about the pronunciation of the cities.
这些城市的名怎么发音，不要担心。
They're Hebrew words, and we're probably all pronouncing it wrong.
它是那个希伯来语，我们可能都说错了，反正不要担心它这个城市的名字。
They're all in Moab.
他们都在摩押这些城市。
And don't worry about the names, how to pronounce them.
这些城市怎么发音，不要担心。
Just look at what's going to happen to them.
我们就看看他们发生了什么。
Who's ready to read? Say amen.
Mary
Mary, go for it.
Right?
How, Mary? Yes. 1 to
张老
9.
师，您这要读是吗？
从第几节到第几节？
就把15章读完，这总共9节。
我奉主耶稣的名读以赛亚书第15章第1节到第9节。神要毁灭摩押，类摩押的末世，一夜之间，摩押的亚尔变为荒废，归于无有。一夜之间，摩押的基尔变为荒废，归为无有。他们上巴伊，又往底本，到高处去哭泣。摩押人因尼波和米底巴哀嚎，个人头上光秃，胡须剃尽。他们在街市上都束腰麻布，在房顶上和宽阔处巨歌哀嚎，眼泪汪汪。希实本和以利亚利悲哀的声音达到雅杂，所以摩押带兵器的高声喊嚷，人心战惊。我心为摩押悲哀，他的愧疚，逃到索尔，到伊基拉、施利施亚，他们上鲁西坡，随走随哭，在何罗念的路上，因毁灭举起哀声，因为宁林的水成为干枯，青草枯干，嫩草灭没，青绿之物一无所有。因此摩押人所得的财物和所积蓄的都要运过柳树河，哀声变为摩押的四境，变为摩押的四境，哀号的声音达到以基连，哀号的声音达到比尔以林，底门的水充满了血，我还要加增底门的灾难，叫狮子来追上摩押头脱的民和那地上所余剩的人。阿门。
他们
Moab is going to be ruined in 1 day.
好
One
Sorry.
day, Moab is going to disappear.
1天之内摩押就会消失。
Tragedy will strike quickly.
灾难来的时候都是很快的。
When tragedy comes, when people get scared, where do they go?
当灾难降临的时候，人们害怕的时候，他们去哪里？
Verse 2, they all go to their temple.
第2节说他们都去他们的那个庙里边。
This isn't the temple of the Creator. This is the temple of their local idols, their local gods.
这不是那个就是我们造物主的这个神殿，它是他们就是所拜的偶像所祭拜的一个殿。
When trouble comes now, nobody shaves their head and cuts off their beard.
当人们来的时候是 没有人去剃他们的头，然后去把胡须给剪净。
Nobody puts on sackcloth. Rough.
You said like when trouble comes or when there is no trouble.
When trouble does come, when there's chaos in the streets, people mourn, they cry, they weep.
当这个灾难来的时候，人们会在街上那个哀嚎痛哭。
When I lived in Africa, we lived on the road going out to the city cemetery.
我的那个，当我住在非洲的时候，我是住在那个路上，然后可以去到那个城市外的那个墓地。
The city of 2 million people, there were people going to the cemetery every day.
然后这个城市有很多人，然后很多人都去那个墓地。
And to transport the mourners, they would transport them in the back of a 2.5-ton truck, a converted army truck.
然后他们怎么样运输这些人呢？就是从军队改装完的那种卡车。
And you would hire people to wail and cry at the funeral.
你会就雇一些人让他们在葬礼上哭。
And quite often the family members are all crying and grief-stricken.
然后经常都是在葬礼上，这个家庭成员们是哭。
Verse 3 tells us it's going to be terrible. They'll be lying down weeping.
然后第3节告诉我们，这个就是所有人都是聚个哀嚎，眼泪汪汪。
And you can hear the cry a long way away.
然后你在可以就是很远很远的地方都能听到他们的哭声，这个哭声这个范围很大。
Verse 4, Heshbon and Eliah were about maybe 40 miles from Jahaz.
在这里说的是，希实本和以利亚利跟亚达之间大概有40英里的距离。
That's probably an exaggeration, but it was a lot of loud crying.
可能就是比较夸张了，但是也是告诉大家这里有很多很多的哭声。
That's what the civilians are doing. The army men, they're crying out, their hearts are faint.
然后这些就是打仗的这些士兵们也哭，他们的心里就是也是非常软弱的。
Not so from what we see of the people in Ukraine.
就像我们现在看见乌克兰的这些人是一样的。
They seem to have stout hearts there. The war in Ukraine is still going on.
They have what?
The war in Ukraine is still going on. Russia has not been able to come in and take out the people quickly.
我们看就是可能战争还得要持续一段时间，因为看起来俄罗斯不是很快就能胜的那种。
If Ukraine had been over, if the war in Ukraine had been over in a day, that would be like this trouble coming to Moab.
但如果这个乌克兰的战争在1天之内就能结束的话，那就有点像这里所描述的磨鸭子现在这种情况。
But in Ukraine, they did not go cry out in the temples. They armed themselves in the streets.
乌克兰人并没有去他庙里去祈祷，然后他们只是在街上自己武装自己。
And the armed men were not faint.
然后那个他们那些就是人也没有害怕。
So apparently the people in Moab didn't have much backbone.
可见在摩押的那个人，他们没有太大的勇气，就是那些士兵。
It says that they went around everywhere weeping.
就说他们是去到任何地方都在那里哭。
and cried out about their destruction.
然后因为这些毁灭的事情，他们到处哭。
The grass is withered, the vegetation is gone, nothing green is left.
青草枯干，嫩草灭没，青绿之物一无所有。
All of their wealth is carried away by the army that captured them.
然后所有他们的财富都被那些占领他们的人给拿走了。
And the crying of the people, it reaches as far as Eglaim and Bir Elim.
哀嚎的声音达到以基连和比尔以林。
And there's a lot of bloodshed. The waters in the rivers are full of blood.
因为流了很多的血，然后河也被染红了。
And after tragedy has come to a city, you see the stray dogs in the streets.
然后当你战争发现，当你来到城里，在街道上，你看那些有无家可归的狗。
In Moab, the lions are coming in to feed on the remains.
然后在摩押的是狮子来追上逃脱的民和那所余剩的人。
Moab is going to look like the rape of Nanking.
摩押看起来可能就像当时南京的那种情况。
It's going to look like any place the army has marched through and left nothing.
就像任何地方，就像这个世界上任何地方曾经被军队所学习过，然后一无所剩的一个地方。
It's going to be bad for Moab.
对于摩押来说，真的这个特别的糟糕。
So we will start with chapter 16 next time.
所以下一次我们从16章开始学。
And does anyone have any questions?